This is a national scandal, isn't it, water? I mean, it's becoming, actually, I say a scandal, a sick joke, literally, in this country. More and more people falling ill because there's so much pollution running into our rivers and running into our sea. We'll be coming live from a polluted beach a little bit later. And these latest figures under the Freedom of Information Act that we've got hold of, pollution incidents up 30%, despite the water companies being ordered to cut them. They've gone up by nearly a third. Bills up by over £100. When are we going to get to grips with, as I say, a national scandal?
Part of the problem, I think, too, is it's still cheaper for the companies to shove the pollution in the water and take the fines, because the fines aren't big enough. Perhaps if the directors of these companies faced a severer penalty, because the fines don't come out of their pockets, when they're fined, then you're going to stick that on the poor old customer's bill in the first place. Perhaps we should have to say, you directors will be held responsible, and perhaps we have to consider, if you pollute the water, you're going to prison. And
broadly speaking, the reason that they have to put untreated sewage directly into the water when it rains is because they don't have the infrastructure to treat it. It becomes overwhelmed, which didn't used to be the case. It's not as if something has fundamentally changed in our climate here. And that's because shareholders are pocketing the dividends. Money that should be spent on the infrastructure and upgrading it and making it fit for purpose is going into people's private holidays. It's ridiculous.
I don't think we've had a new reservoir in the South East for over 40 years.
You're absolutely right.
Which is a complete scandal.
Yep.
So this underinvestment has been going on for decades, but it's got much worse in the last 10 years, much worse. And it's really deeply, deeply unacceptable.
Yeah, I think that, the extraordinary thing seems to be is that we've all been talking about this. Then, there's been public outrage, hasn't there, about the fact that our waterways, we can't trust how clean our seas, our rivers are. And yet, despite that, despite everybody looking at it and saying things need to change, they've got worse, Nels.
Yeah, well, it's another day, another privatisation scandal. Surprise, surprise. This time around, so we actually have privatisation literally poisoning us. Literally poisoning our water or so. So if you go for this is a green and pleasant land, as we like to say or so, and it is a green and pleasant land. But if you step inside our waters or so, you go for a quick dip, you'll find something green and deeply unpleasant if you're not careful or so. So our issue has to be, once again, to look at what is actually happening to the money that's coming out of that's been extracted out of us for water by the water companies. We can't have polluted water and high bills at the exact same time. No. Something has to give somewhere. We can't. That our natural monopolies cannot be a source of hoarding wealth. They must be a means of actually our natural monopolies. In fact, the best term to describe it is our natural wealth, our natural shared wealth, cannot be held in private hands, because when it does, this is proven once again to fail and fail and fail, and now it's poisoning us.
It is in private hands. Yep. And unlike the rail companies, there's a sort of de facto nationalisation of the rail system in this country going on, because the contracts that the rail companies have are running out, so they don't have to be bought and the government can step in. So we're getting a de facto renationalisation of the railways. But we can't do that with the water companies because we'd have to buy it back from them under law. So we can't afford... So we're stuck with it, aren't we?
Yeah, they've got to work with what they've got.
Exactly.
And the regulators are not tough enough. They need more teeth. And I still think the way to they need a form of shock and awe, these directors, because they're not doing enough. We need to know how many dividends they took out of the company and how many they've taken over, and that should be repaid and put it into investment. Because the bill to get these, the bill to sort this out is billions of pounds. If you had your way and we were to renationalise the water companies, it'd probably be £1 trillion, and that would take too long. And we haven't got the time.
And we're basically one of the only countries in the world to have this problem. Almost every other country, certainly you look at Europe, just look across the Channel, they don't have these issues. No. They're able to treat their sewage. Mm-hmm. They're able to provide people with clean water to drink, to swim in the rivers, to fish in, to swim in the sea. They don't have this problem. This has become a uniquely UK problem. It's shameful.
Yeah, we drank the privatisation Kool-Aid and it's now poisoning us once again, quite literally. I feel that, just to address what you said about the regulator side of things, that's part of the punchline here. Look, I've got friends who are regulators, are lovely to them, but everybody knows deep down that the money is actually working on the other side of things. So if you're a regulator and you're actually really good enough, or so, you go inside, say, an organisation that you're regulating, and you're asking the right questions, you're tough enough, you're holding them to account, Even though what you'll probably often find is that a couple of months later, that regulator's working for the company.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because that's how this works. That's the process of incentivisation. Because the actual reality of it is that the only regulation that we have here, the regulations that where the regulator should be working of it, is regulating what the state is doing with our natural monopolies. It shouldn't be in the hands of private entities or private people or so, and it shouldn't actually be something that's extracting money out of us while simultaneously poisoning us.
Well, on the subject of regulators, so Water UK spokesperson has said, we've been clear the water system isn't working and support the Independent Water Commission looking at every aspect of how the industry is regulated. However, no sewage spills ever acceptable, and water companies are investing £12 billion to almost halve spills from storm overflows by 2030.
And we've got
But
one
the
water
issue
company,
is,
by the way, Thames Water, which is teetering on the edge of bankruptcy, and it's our biggest water company, supplying 28% of the country, teetering on the edge of bankruptcy.
And we know that the issue is that, you know, it's consumers that are going to end up paying for this, because all the money that's gone, that's been taken out of those companies, we're not going to get back, are we? No. And any further developments that need to be done, realistically, it's going to be paid from ever-increasing water bills.
So we're here once again to rescue capital once it's actually gone, once it's gone bust. Yeah. But when the good times are there, when the champagne's being popped and the crystals being shared and everything else, so the cakes and the national cake, which is in private hands, is being shared amongst each other, it's totally fine. But during the bad times, we have to step in and rescue it. And on top of that, we still get high bills. This is a farce. Okay. This is farcical, and it can't continue. It can't be allowed to continue.
From one farce to another...
Oh, just to say, before we move on, because you did talk about the Environment Agency, so they had also had their say on this and said, the level of pollution is unacceptable. We're taking a number of steps to hold water companies to account if they pollute our rivers and waterways.
Well, what are those steps?
Yeah, well, they say
the lovely words.
They're not big enough steps, whatever they're doing.
I think we could have read that statement out 3 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm serious. Right, as I said, from one farce to another, the post office scandal. I know to some extent we're all slightly going, well, yeah, we know all about that, but can we move on? No, because the scandal's still with us. We're going to be, Sarah and I are going to be talking a bit later on to the youngest sub-postmaster who was wholly wrongly accused of misappropriating thousands of pounds from the business that he'd worked night and day to set up, and then he was accused of thieving from it. He lost his job. He went through so much legal nightmare. He lost his reputation in the community. Everybody basically pointed at him in the street and said he was a thief. You know, they couldn't be trusted, couldn't get a decent job. He lost a huge amount of earning potential. He has still not received the compensation that he deserves and that he's been promised. And he's one of those people that Sir Alan Bates, Mr Bates versus the Post Office, is talking about when he says that they absolutely... There he is.
Chris
they absolutely should be suing the government now, simply getting up on their hind legs, stop sitting back and waiting for the money because it ain't going to come. Sue the government and get it as quickly as possible.
They haven't just not had their compensation, Richard. Some people lost their liberty. They went to prison, and on a wicked lie... Some
people took their own lives.
And some people took their own lives. Far too late for them. You can never get your liberty back. And the people who took their own lives. This is one of the greatest scandals affecting this country, I think, in modern times.
And it's going on.
And it's going on. The money's there. We've been through endless inquiries. If it hadn't been for Alan Bates, we wouldn't probably be talking about this, sadly, because the drama, the TV drama, really... lit a nerve, lit a touch paper in this country, didn't it? My own paper, actually, what it's worth, been banging on about it, but it took a TV drama for the right thing to be done. We thought, and it's still not being done. And so, do you know what I think, cynically? These dreadful people in charge are waiting for some of these people to die. Probably, and then they won't have to pay the money.
And they are dying.
And they are dying.
Because it's been going on.
And there's still, I mean, you know, one of the victims, Betty's in her 90s, isn't she? And you just think, you know, to be facing that situation where there isn't a resolution on how much money you're owed, and that's what it comes down to, isn't it?
And the letter to clear her name.
About.
And the letter to clear her name, because the postmaster or postmistress was the paragon of virtue in the local community. Yes, they really were. Yeah. And they were completely demonised, ostracised.
Hell and back for the communities they lived in because of then the stain on their reputations as well.
And
not only of the money
government ministers, including the one you're speaking to later, the Lib Dem leader, didn't listen to Alan, to Bates and others for years and years. They were banging at the door saying, listen to us.
And what's happened to the possibility of prosecutions?
Well,
and I mean prosecutions of the post office executives who sat on top of this pyramid of
But that's the key point there. Is it not fascinating how fast the justice system, how fast the state can move when the little person is accused of doing something wrong? Yeah. How fast the state, how fast the justice system can move when the little person is, or how slowly the state, or how slowly it can move when it's time for the little person to get justice. Yeah. This is similar to what we saw the lady, the couple, the lady and gentleman we saw yesterday for the justice for the J97, the justice for the 97 Liverpool situation, Hillsborough situation just yesterday. It's the exact same thing. Those long, drawn-out campaigns for justice, which shouldn't take anywhere near as long as that, in the slightest bit. But they should also just be quite clearly... There has to be some sort of balance between the power of the state, when the state does something wrong, and the power of the individual. So when the state is actually wronged, say, people, or big entities of wrong people, there has to be some degree of parity in terms of how they can compete with each other or so for justice. Other than that, also, you'll continue to get these situations, be it J97, be it the postmasters, be it so many different things or so, that situation where these people are spending their lives, their careers, essentially everything, their good names, to fight for justice when they shouldn't have to.
And the other scandal in this, Fujitsu, who provided this dodgy, inefficient equipment, they've still got huge contracts with government. Why? And they haven't coughed up a single penny, I don't think, in compensation, and they're culpable too, as is the government. There is a fund of money for those postmasters and postmistresses, and the next government minister you have on here, you've just got to pin them to the ground almost to say, when are they getting their money?
Pay up.
So many
and their apology, yeah. And when are Fujitsu going to do the right thing? And why are we still allowing Fujitsu to work in government? Because they can't be trusted.
And Charlotte, you came up with an interesting thought in the break before this, saying, well, why can't there be at least some decent interim payments on the disputed amounts of money? At least pay some of it now, and then argue the toss.
Quite right.
Because that's the point, you know, Chris Head is making... he's only been offered 35% of what his lawyer says he has lost as a consequence of it. So, of course, all of it's held up until a sum is reached. But you think, there must be some mechanism for paying out...
interim payment.
And the government have used really expensive lawyers to try and crush these people.
I think that's the other part, but Sir Alan Bates... I think it's Sir Alan Bates.
Yes, Sir Alan Bates.
Sir Alan Bates. So I agree with Sir Alan Bates that they should actually be taking action against the government here. But my fear is that the government has unlimited resources and access to the best of lawyers. So, and similar to what the lady from J97 said to me yesterday in the green room, that you will find yourself there with one mediocrely paid lawyer who's doing their absolute best, maybe working on a pro bono basis, whereas the state was walking
against the phalanx of the creme de la creme.
You see the Post Office inquiry, rows and rows of bewigged lawyers, all being funded by the taxpayer.
And there is a difference. I mean, the government say they're continuing to work at pace to ensure all postmasters receive the financial redress and justice they deserve, as long as claimants respond reasonably promptly, they say. We would expect to settle all claims by the end of this year, but that is very different to Sir Alan Bates, who was saying 2027, according to his estimations, about how they're being dealt with at the moment in the
this year, Charlotte, that's another 8 months.
Yeah.
They don't have 8 months.
And what happens in that
Why
time?
can't they do it in 8 days?
Yeah.
We're going to be talking to Ed Davey in a couple of minutes, the leader of the Lib Dems, on the morning that we get the new inflation figures, around about 7 o'clock this morning. They're expected to drop. They're running at 2.8% now, aren't they? They're expected to get closer to the target of 2%. But most people are saying this is just simply going to be the calm before the storm, because you've got the Employers' National Insurance hike, which kicked in at the beginning of this month. And, of course, you've got what's happening coming out of the Oval Office in Washington, complete uncertainty on the global markets. And the prediction is that maybe a bit of temporary good news this morning, and then stuff is going to rocket. Inflation's going to rise really steeply.
There's some talk it could be about 3.7, 3.8% by the middle of the summer. You've got
that soon? Wow.
Yeah, we've got council tax bills going up. Yeah. All utility bills are going up. That all adds to it.
Water bills.
Water bills. Oddly, because of the uncertainty triggered by Trump, oil prices are falling, actually, so when you fill up your car, you'll have probably noticed a small reduction. But we're in for a very sticky summer, and all governments, in the end, are measured on the cost of living.
Yep.
And the pound in people's pockets.
So the corollary of all that is going to be probably tax rises in the autumn.
Yeah.
And, interest rates right now, too, because interest rates are still really unaffordably high. And so if this is the calm before the storm, can we at least have an interest rate cut before the storm, too? Which obviously is not unlikely to happen. Also, the NPC will see it very, very differently to me.
I think they will cut interest rates, actually, because I think they'll be so nervous about the instability on the markets.
Good point,
They'll want to kickstart a recovery, although it's not up to the government, it's up to the Independent Committee.
That's right.
Indeed, yep, the MPC, absolutely.
It's just a really worrying time for people,
Really
isn't
is.
it, in the meantime? Because, you know, they're just trying to pay the cost of bills and they're worried about how they're going up, worried about what their finances are going to look like along a longer-term basis.
Yeah, and unemployment seems to be ticking up too. Job vacancies are down because if you whack employers, small and large, with extra national insurance, they haven't got as much money to hire people or to keep people.
We will talk at the end of this item about this 400, 500-year-old oak tree that's been chopped down unilaterally by its owners.
Can I just ask one thing? Ed Davey, love the guy. Can he please do us all a favour and stop dancing for just a little bit? Take a time out of the dancing. It's very appealing.
He's probably listening to this right now.
It worked in the last election,
Is he
probably worked in the
there?
next election. But
He's
the
here
dancing
right
needs to
now.
calm down a little.
No more
A
dancing,
very
Ed.
good
You hear
morning
that?
to you, Ed Davey. Thank you very much for joining us. Apologies, we have to start off by putting Nels' point to you, but I feel it's only fair to give you the right of reply on your dancing. What would you like to say?
Oh, well, I'm very disappointed he doesn't like the dancing. I'm getting great feedback. And particularly the Trump dance, you know, when people are very angry with the President of the United States and the way he's behaving to the whole world, frankly, but also to British car makers, British steel industry, British exporters. People are cross, and so I'm afraid I'll do a bit of dancing to take the mick out of him as part of the Lib Dem campaign to say we should fight back against these appalling
I'm
tariffs.
sorry, I'm going to disagree with our
You're gonna say
panellists
carry on
here.
dancing?
I think you should dance on because you're I think the only party leader in this country who seems to be having a good time, who actually seems to be enjoying the job and getting a few laughs out of it, which makes a change. But look, let's talk about what you're here to talk about. After the government's commitment to putting more police on the beat in towns and cities last week, that was announced last week, your party are calling for this whole new wave of countryside coppers because you say there simply aren't any. You go into the countryside and you don't see any police. And there's a plague, and this is an absolute fact, a plague of rural crime. So lay out what you want.
Yeah, you're right. There's less than 0.5% of police in England and Wales are dedicated to fighting rural crime, and the government's announcement last week didn't touch it. So we're saying we need a countryside copper guarantee. We need to increase the number of police officers and have dedicated rural crime teams with real leads that people know are there and they can follow up with specialist equipment. For example, they should have drones to help them. You're seeing a rise in really worrying crime, livestock theft, equipment theft. You're seeing a hair coursing being run by organised criminal gangs, which is damaging crops, but also seeing farmers threatened. So it's quite serious crime here, and the police don't have the resources they need. So that's what we're calling for today in the Liberal Democrats, a countryside copper guarantee, so the people are there to protect our rural areas.
OK, so fundamentally, what you seem to be saying is that in the more rural areas of this country, say like Norfolk, very, very rural county, or maybe say Shropshire, you've got your regular police officers who are used to dealing with town and city crime, which is of a very different type to rural crime, but you don't have these dedicated officers who understand how rural crime works and where the targets are.
That's absolutely right. And in our package of proposals, we're talking about a comprehensive approach. So, for example, 999 call handlers need to be trained to understand rural crime and not to dismiss it. We need specialist police officers properly trained with the relevant technology. Now, let's be clear, the picture varies across the country. So in a force like Lancashire, they've got 38 officers. Maybe they need more, but they've put an effort there. But in Devon and Cornwall, they've just got 4 police officers dedicated to rural crime, according to the information they sent us. 4? So that is really, really worrying.
Are you sure about that?
Sorry?
4? Only 4 for Devon and Cornwall?
Yeah, well, we undertook a Freedom of Information request to every police force across England and Wales. 37, the vast majority, kindly replied. And Devon and Cornwall said they'd only got 4 officers dedicated to rural crime. I mean, it's quite astonishing, really. And I think where there are other forces that are doing a better job, there are some that really have got to sort themselves out, and that will require more support from the Home Office and a proper strategy there's just no strategy coming from the government to tackle rural crime.
I mean, there's no doubt, you know, it's serious and has a big impact for those who are affected by it. But is this really the right focus? Because I think, you know, when we look at the amount of crime on our streets, there's no doubt that there are more crimes in urban areas, aren't they? We know that there are 99 crimes per 1,000 in urban areas, 59 crimes per 1,000 in rural areas. And if we look at the difference, you know, people are worried about being attacked, they're worried about shoplifting, they're worried about an awful lot of crimes, aren't there? Is this the right focus? Are you sure? And are people going to be with you on this? That actually that's the right way to spend the money if people are worried about their safety on the streets?
Well, we're worried about urban crime too. I represent an area in suburbs of London, and we're really worried about crime there. We need community police teams. The government have made some steps in the right direction, but I think we need to have more community police officers to give people more confidence and to tackle the appalling crime there. But I don't think it's an either-or. One of my concerns is that the rural crime has been forgotten and ignored, first by the last Conservative government, now in Labour's strategy, and that's why Liberal Democrats want to give it some attention. I think you do need to tackle the crime, the serious crime in our towns and cities, but I don't think that should come at the expense of forgetting the appalling crimes we're seeing. You know, organised crime gangs terrorising some farmers. That's surely not acceptable. The only way we're going to tackle it is by getting serious about some more police resources there and with proper technology to support the officers.
OK,
I don't know if
you've made that clear. Can we just, seeing as you're here, can we just get your take on a couple of the big issues of the moment as Lib Dem leader? Yeah. Just supposing you were in coalition at the moment, let's say you were Prime Minister at the moment, how would you deal with Donald Trump? What would be your strategy for handling him?
Well, first of all, do some of what the Prime Minister is doing. You do need to talk to the United States. If we can get a trade deal that's in Britain's interest, of course we should try to get one. However, I do think we've been pulling our punches far too much. I think we do need to be tougher with Trump, and one of the ways of doing that is to work with others. So Liberal Democrats have called for an economic coalition of the willing with our European partners, our Commonwealth partners, countries like Canada, and others. The Prime Minister's done a good job with the military coalition of the willing to stand up to Putin and Russia's appalling attack on Ukraine. We now need an analogous coalition, an economic coalition of the willing to stand up to Trump.
But you said that Donald Trump, you called him a bully over the tariffs, and you were urging Sir Keir Starmer, weren't you, to be tougher on him and to fight back over that, and you were talking about retaliation. Yeah, but it seems Keir Starmer's tactics might be working then. J.D. Vance yesterday was talking about the prospect of a great deal that actually, because of the tactics we've taken, it may well put us ahead of others.
Well, first of all, we've got the same tariffs on our exporters as everyone else. We've got 25% on our automotive industry, and that's our biggest export to the United States. So we're not getting any favourable treatment there, are we? We've seen the impact of his tariffs on our steel industry, and we're seeing it on all our exporters, just the same as everyone else. So we're not getting any special favours now. Maybe the talks will produce some benefit, but you know, I still think there are other options that they should be pursuing, showing Donald Trump and the Americans that we have alternatives. So, for example, if we had a UK-EU customs union, get rid of some of the awful red tape that the Conservatives introduced, that would really boost our trade and exports. I was with a company just the other day, yesterday in St Neots in Cambridgeshire. They were making parts for Jaguar Land Rover, and they're really worried about these US tariffs on the car-making industry, and they want to expand trade elsewhere, including in Europe. They're fed up of the bureaucracy introduced by Boris Johnson in his failed trade deal. So there are other strategies we could adopt to stand up to the United States and boost our trade elsewhere.
That meeting certainly sounds like a straw in the wind at the moment. Can I ask you this then? What do you make of this forthcoming state visit by Trump? We don't have a date for it yet, but it's obviously going to happen. Would you be, if you were in charge, would you be finding a way to delay that indefinitely? Because isn't it going to be incredibly embarrassing to have the president here, feted, red carpeted, left, right and centre, meeting the king, meeting the future king and all the rest of it, when this is the guy who says that that Ukraine started the war with Russia and, frankly, spouts nonsense one day after the next. Would you try and delay the state visit or put it off indefinitely?
Well, I've said from the inauguration of President Trump that we should have the state visit out there on the table because we need it to use it as leverage. We don't have a lot of leverage in our negotiations with President Trump, but we know he, and this is to his credit, was very fond of our late Queen and respects our King and would like a state banquet. But I want to know what we are getting in return. I want to know what we're doing in terms of getting more security guarantees and support for Ukraine in their fight against Russia, the point you mentioned, Richard.
Okay,
and I also want to see him... if we get things that we need from the visit, then it should go ahead, and I say that through gritted teeth. However, if we don't get what we need, whether it's on defence and security or on the economy and trade, then I think we should put a big question mark over it. Right. And let's put yourself in...
Sorry to interrupt. We're running out of time.
Can I make this... No...
And I just want to ask you, because it's really important that we speak to you about the Post Office because of the situation that's happening today, that Sir Alan Bates is urging victims to sue the government because of the compensation that hasn't been paid. For you, as a former Post Office minister, obviously this is of relevance. You know, it just feels like that the victims were failed at the time and they're being failed yet again now, aren't they, with the lack of compensation being paid?
I think Sir Alan Bates is absolutely right. I would encourage him and the other people to take the government to court for their failures. You know, the subpostmasters suffered for so long. They were lied to by the Post Office. They deserved this compensation years ago, and the last government dragged its feet. Now the current government is dragging its feet. And you know, they've allowed the Post Office itself to manage part of this process. It is quite outrageous. The High Court judgment, which really brought this to light, was in 2019, 6 years ago. So I'm afraid the compensation is long overdue, and I think Sir Alan Bates is right.
OK, thank you very much indeed for your time this morning,
Leader of the Liberal Democrats.
Just time briefly to give you some facts about this oak tree that was chopped down. Very quickly, it was between 400 and 500 years old. It's seen 24 kings and queens. It was 200 years old when the first Prime Minister was appointed here. America hadn't been discovered and it survived the Great Fire of London, and now someone's chopped it down. Appalling. 12th of never. That's when many wrongly accused Post Office subpostmasters reckon they'll get their compensation. And the Post Office campaigner, Sir Alan Bates, has said enough, enough. He's urged victims of the Horizon scandal to get on their own hind legs and take new legal action against the UK government over these seemingly infinite delays to compensation.
Well, in an email, Mr Bates said, returning to the courts may seem to be a long haul, but it will probably be the quickest way to ensure fairness for all. He fears victims could be waiting until 2027 for all claims to be settled. And that is a forecast the government's disputed. But here's what Alan Bates told us last year about why he keeps up the fight.
It's been the worst unpaid job I've had for 20 years, but it's just got to carry on with it. And you see the suffering that happened to so many people, and it's not something you can give up.
Well, supporting the new legal action is Chris Head, who became Britain's youngest sub-postmaster. He was only 18, just out of school. But he was later accused of stealing £80,000 from the Post Office. And despite receiving an OBE for his tireless campaigning, he's getting that gong later today at the Palace. That's his reward for everything he's done. What he hasn't got is his payout. And in fact, the payout that you've applied for keeps shrinking. You were offered, what was it, 30-odd%?
Yeah, it was. It took 4 offers to get to 35%. You know, we started in the first offer at 13, and it took us nearly 2 years to get to 35.
But now it's going down again.
We referred the case to an independent panellist, but you're so restricted in the input that you get into that panel through 3 sides of A4 written submissions that they actually sent it backwards. And obviously, I disputed that with the government, and then they reinstated it. But now you're at a risk because you want to, you know, if you have to dispute it again, you go back to the same panel. So you have that risk of it going back down.
And this must be so frustrating for you that it's taken all this time And it's had such an impact on your life, hasn't it? And you're still left in limbo.
Yeah, you know, we've been fighting this. You know, we took them to court in 2017 to 2019. You know, that case was settled because we know the government used unlimited taxpayer funds to defeat us in court. And you know, but here we are now, 2025. You know, 6 years after that court action, and thousands of people are still waiting.
Every sub-postmaster story is slightly different, and that's the case with you. I mean, you started, as I said, as a kid. You were only 18, which is a big responsibility to take on a post office and run it. And boy, did you throw yourself into it. I mean, you worked very long days to build up the business, to build up trust. It was going really well, and then you started to notice small discrepancies in the balance. But how much was seen?
I mean, it was you know, amounts of 50, 100, maybe even a couple of £100. And we've talked about small, but they're not insignificant sums. But obviously, you know, like, when you call the helpline, they tell you that, well, you're the only one that's having that problem. And obviously, you're self-contracted, so therefore you're responsible to make them good if you can't, you know, find them.
So you paid up out of your own
so I
pocket?
just paid them. Yeah, I paid back £23,000. In total over the 9 years that I was in office.
But there was a big total that they said that was owed.
Yeah, so in 2014 we had a huge problems with the Horizon. It was throwing up all kinds of messages saying that the data was corrupt. It wasn't transmitting to the data centre. And we battled with them for the engineers on site for over 6 months.
So they rebooted the system?
They rebooted the system. They eventually agreed to replace the system after 6 months. And when they replace the system, you get a balance at the end of a month. And when we balanced the offers at the end of that, it showed up a discrepancy of over £40,000.
Boom.
And you just think, this can't be right. You know, you kind of set it aside and you contact them again. But within a month, when we got to the next balance, it doubled. It was over 80. And that's when you really, you think, well, there's something seriously wrong here. You know, you think that, they tell you, don't worry, it'll come back, it'll correct itself. And it just didn't.
But the post office wouldn't accept any of the arguments you put forward, and you lost your job.
Next for you?
Yeah, so they did an investigation, suspended me in February of 2015. We went through 2 interviews under caution at a solicitor's office in Newcastle. They searched my home, which was my father's home at the time, searched my cars, all that kind of, looking for money, which obviously...
Looking for how you were spending the money.
They've nothing. And after 6 months, they wrote to me and said, we're dropping the case. And I thought, it's the end, it's over. And a week later, I got another letter saying, but we're going to take civil action because we still want to recover the money. And that went on for almost 2.5, 3 years.
So you had that hanging over you?
I had that hanging over me the entire time.
And people in the street, in your small local community, pointing the finger.
Yeah, of course, because it sticks, doesn't it? Mud sticks.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's very, very difficult to...
How did you put up with that as a young lad?
Well, I mean, eventually, I tried to secure other work outside that, since post office was all I'd known, so I was taken over from such a young age. And I ended up leaving the country because I just couldn't secure any work. So it forced me out of the country. So
for you, when you're looking at sort of the money that you feel you're owed, it's not just sort of the paying back of the money that you'd paid to them, that, there was just so much of an impact of your life that actually...
not just on me, it's obviously had an impact on my family, because, my family was supporting me in the business. So the claim is made up by certain elements, as you say, of damages, of loss of earnings, of losing your business, and all these kind of things. And I think, you get these promises made by the post office originally, and then the government, where they say, we're going to pay full and fair compensation. It's to put you back in the position that you would have been in. And then the offer drops through the door, and they offer you the first offer 13%. You think, well,
So what reasons have they given? You seem to have settled now on getting, well, you haven't settled yet, but what they seem to have settled is on offering you 70% less of what you've applied for, roughly, about 70% less. What reasons do they give for that?
Well, to go from the offer where we started at to where we are now, we've provided no new information on top of what they had in the first place. It's just reiterating the arguments over and over again.
So heels in the sand, basically.
Yeah.
And how does it feel today? Obviously, you're going to get an OBE, you're going to be celebrated, you're going to be honoured for the campaigning that you've done on this issue, for the service you've provided to the state, and yet, on the same token, the state's sort of making it hard for you to get this compensation.
It overshadows it a little bit, because you think, well, it's a privilege and honour to receive recognition for the work that's been done, but it would be nice to be at the end of the process and to know that everybody has received what they're due, and then you can say, right, you can move on with your life. But that's just not the case. We're going to receive an honour, with other members of the group, and then the campaign's going to have to continue straight away again.
You couldn't make up the irony, could you?
No.
You're getting an OBE at the panel. Do you know who you're getting it from?
We don't know yet. We haven't been told.
Okay.
So we have to...
Anyway, you're going to receive from royalty an OBE for campaigning to right these wrongs, and then yet in your individual case, you can't get compensation.
There's a wrong that
I find
still
it
hasn't been
absolutely
righted.
breathtaking.
Yeah, it's
breathtaking.
Yeah, it's extraordinary, really. You know, after all the promises that have been made, after the ITV drama that you saw, and obviously the public outcry, and here we are. You know, again, what 13, 14 months after that drama, and it's still going on.
Still continuing.
So, are you going to do what Mr. Bates has been suggesting and sue the government?
I think, look, I think we're running out of options. I mean, the government keeps making these promises, so they're now saying we're going to pay you by the end of 2025. The problem is they made the promise that we're going to pay us by the end of 2022, and then at the end of 2023,
I remember, yeah.
and then end of 2024. So it's just history repeating itself. So we can't, you know, trust that they're going to do what they're saying, because they failed us over and over again.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, if we delay the legal action and we wait till the end of the year, and then they don't deliver on their promises, we've wasted, you know, another 9 or 10 months.
So the answer is yes.
So I think the answer has to be yes.
Yeah, I think you're right, Tim.
goodness.
I think you're absolutely right.
They have to be held to account. They have to be, you know,
so sorry
held
for
to
you
take
account.
matters into your
having
own
this
hands.
hanging over your head, but listen, you know, a massive congratulations today. Enjoy it, 'cause it's obviously such a special occasion, isn't it? What a really amazing thing. So thanks for coming
Thanks a
in,
lot.
wearing your best suit, coming in to
Yeah,
talk
you
to
look
us
great.
this morning. We really appreciate
I
it.
like your tie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Really cool time. Well, look, let's talk about this 2025 promise. A government spokesperson has told this programme that they are continuing to work, quote, at pace. Well, different forms of paces, aren't there? To ensure all postmasters receive financial redress and justice that they deserve. And they've said that so long as the claimants respond reasonably promptly, as if is there a suggestion that you're not doing that? That the government would expect to settle all claims by the end of this year. But as you say, we've read statements like that out before,
Yes.
with a different date, 24, 23, 22.
3 years.
Yeah.
It's more than the same thing, yeah.
So we'll see.
Let's hope it all gets sorted soon. Anyway, thanks very much.
The breaking news this morning, released in the last hour, latest inflation. The figures show an unexpected drop, down to 2.6%.
But the fall may only be temporary. It's expected to spike again thanks to April's rising energy bills and uncertain trade tariffs. Joining us now is Minister for the Future of Roads, Lilian Greenwood. Good morning to you. We will come on to talk about roads, but just to touch on that, first of all, those inflation figures, a step in the right direction, but it seems that there'll be 2 steps back, won't there, when the impact of higher bills come in, the impact of national insurance increases come in, the uncertainty over global tariffs hit. Things are going to get a lot worse, aren't they?
Well, look, we are facing a changing world, but it's very welcome that inflation has fallen for the last 2 months and that the economy grew last month. And of course, we know that wages are rising faster than prices. One of the things that was absolutely at the centre of this government's commitments was to tackle the rising cost of living, and we're seeking to do that. But we know there's a lot further to go. It's why we're taking action like freezing fuel duty, which saves drivers on average £59 a year. It's why we're rolling out those free nursery, the free breakfast clubs in schools. It's about protecting people from these economic headwinds, and we're determined to keep on doing that and keep on delivering our plan for change.
Let's talk about roads, because, of course, you know, you're talking about the fact that drivers heading off for Easter getaways over the bank holiday weekend will have fewer roadworks. You're announcing 1,127 miles of roadworks will be lifted over the 4-day weekend to ease the backlog. Obviously, great news for drivers who I'm sure will be very pleased with that. But if we look at the state of our roads right now, it is shocking, isn't it? You can't go a few metres without coming across a pothole. They are a national embarrassment if you compare them to the state of roads in other countries. I'm sure you will say you've put extra money in, but it's just not going to touch the sides, is it, when we look at the scale of what needs to be done and how quickly it should be done?
Well, look, I'm really pleased that we're able to announce today that over 1,100 miles of roadworks on the strategic road network, so that's the motorways and major trunk roads, those are going to be lifted this weekend so that those 19 million people who are heading away to see family and friends or get a short break are able to get away on time, and hopefully their journeys are as smooth as possible. But we know that we've inherited an appalling state of our roads after 14 years of under-investment. People regularly talk to me about the state of their local roads and the fact that they're full of potholes. And yes, we are investing a record £1.6 billion, giving that money to local authorities so they can get on with sorting the roads out. Of course, we're not going to be able to turn it all around in a single year. That's why I'm arguing very hard in the spending review to give local authorities a long-term funding settlement so that they can get on with fixing our roads, not just filling potholes, although I'm really pleased that the £500 million that we are giving to local authorities this year should enable them to fix an extra 7 million potholes. So absolutely people should start to notice the difference, and we're going to be holding local authorities to account.
Sorry to interrupt, but the local government associations say the additional £500 million will help start to address the ever-growing backlog of local road repairs, but it now stands at £17 billion and it could take more than a decade to fix. So when are people really going to see much of a difference when they're driving around?
Well, look, the increase this year, most local authorities are going to see an increase of almost 40% in the amount of money that we're giving them to help them to fix local roads. So I do expect people to start to see a difference straight away. Every local authority is now required, for the first time under this government, to publish a report by June telling local people on their website in plain English what they're doing with that money, where roads are going to be fixed or resurfaced. We don't want them to just be doing quick patch and mend jobs. We want them to do a proper permanent repairs so that people do see that impact. But of course, when we're facing a situation where over 14 years the last government didn't invest in this vital local infrastructure, we're not going to be able to turn that around overnight. And that's why we want a proper long-term funding settlement for roads maintenance coming out of the spending review so that local authorities can start to make a real inroad into that backlog that we've inherited.
Can I put a really basic question to you on behalf of pretty much every motorist in this country, whether they're a private driver or a commercial driver? It is a universal experience driving around British roads, and has been for many, many years, long before your government came into power, that roadworks, when they do take place, seem to take forever. Now, roads are your thing. You're the parliamentary understate for the future of roads. So this is a question to you and your speciality. Why, when we compare the driving experience in the UK to driving, and I drive a lot in France and I drive a lot in America, and a lot of our viewers drive abroad as well, and we all report the same thing, that when you drive past roadworks, say, on the continent or in the US, it's sniving with workers. They're busy. In this country, you can drive miles through a restricted speed area because of roadworks. And if you're lucky, you might see one bloke eating a sandwich on a JCB. There just doesn't seem to be any work going on. And that is, I'm not being flip, that is a frequently reported story and observation. What's our problem with getting on with roadworks at pace?
Well, we absolutely should be getting on with roadworks at pace. And I agree with you. It's incredibly frustrating if people are driving past roadworks and they're not aware of what work is actually going on. Now, of course, there can be reasons why there's not visible work going on. Sometimes they're waiting for materials to cure or a gas to vent. Or I remember an example someone was telling me about where there was a sinkhole, and obviously work hadn't been able to start straight away, but quite rightly the road was closed to protect people. But what we want is that when roadworks are taking place, they take the minimum amount of time. And that's why we're including in our announcement today on street works is extra. We're doubling the fines for utility companies if they don't comply with the rules around permits, and if they allow roadworks to overrun into weekends and bank holidays, they can be liable for charges of up to £10,000.
We must talk to you briefly about sewage. There was an expectation on the water companies in this country that they would cut pollution incidents by 40%. That was the demand put on them. They've gone up by 30%. Fergal Sharkey, who's been campaigning about this since he was a baby practically, it's been going on for so long, was saying today, just now, that we need an absolute root and branch reform of our water system in this country. Is there any prospect of that happening under this government?
Well, look, it's absolutely clear that the releases of sewage into our seas and rivers and lakes is completely unacceptable, and we are absolutely determined as a government to act on this. We've already passed the Landmark Water Act, which, as you'll know, means that water company bosses will lose their bonuses if they're not reducing those sewage spills, and also that they can be subject to criminal prosecution if they're failing to comply with the law.
Because we know that the sewage incidents are getting worse. People can't go for a swim in any of our waters.
Yeah, and it is absolutely unacceptable. I live close to the River Trent in Nottinghamshire. We've got the British canoeing team who train nearby. They shouldn't be put in danger from using what's one of our greatest natural resources. People should be able to go and enjoy the beach or bathing in local rivers and lakes. And we are determined to act on this. We've already passed, as I say, that landmark legislation, but if more work is needed, then we'll continue to pursue it.
All right, well, good luck with that.
Minister for the Future of Roads, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
We're joined by the GB News presenter and the Mail's Andrew Pearce and the right-from broadcaster Nels. Well, I was saying before the break, huge reaction this morning, probably the biggest of the day, to the chopping down of this 500-year-old oak tree in Enfield in North London. This was done by Mitchell and Butler, who own Toby Carvery, and they say that it was a health and safety issue. People aren't buying it. Adrian on X says, we should boycott Toby Carvery. A lot of people are calling for a boycott of Toby Carvery. How could this be a health and safety hazard? It's in a car park. It's away from the buildings. It's utter madness. Phil on X says, my family of 14 normally meet up for a meal in one of their restaurants once a month. Never again. Disgusting, and on it goes. Real anger.
And that's the way people can hit back, isn't it? Boycott the company, and I would boycott the company too. It's cultural vandalism, it's environmental vandalism, and the tree was so far from the pub. I can't see what basis they took it down. I mean, surely they've broken the law.
They were told the tree was dead, so it's health and safety grounds. But yeah, again, you know, there were questions over that process, aren't there? But when you look at the 500 years of history, that it could have been a sapling when Henry VIII was king, and you just think, you can just imagine sort of all the things it's seen in its time. It just seems a bit tragic to have lost all of that.
Yeah, well, it's a shame. It's an absolute shame. I wonder how many of us actually knew it was a 500-year-old tree, or went there to go actually look at the tree or so.
I think do you
think we didn't appreciate it?
I think maybe it was a landmark in Enfield. I've heard of it.
OK.
I live in North West London, and I hadn't seen it, but I'd heard of it, so I knew about it when I heard it had been cut down. The trouble is, it's not like sort of lopping down a statue or something like that, where there is a way back. There's no way back.
No.
When you've done this, that's it.
Well,
it's a one-way trip.
Sadly, there is no way back for it. Also, there is no way back. It's, hate to be gory, but it's now firewood, effectively, or something else. Or it might make a great chair, or so who knows what it's going to be. But the key thing about it is that when it comes to these sorts of natural monuments or so, whatever they might be, trees, etc., that we probably should start labelling these things and making it clear
there's a tree
to people.
Preservation order system, so why that wasn't in place for this, whereby you then have to apply for planning permission to even trim any branches. So, you know, there were questions over why that wasn't in place.
Or fence it off.
Yeah,
I don't know. But anyway,
make it more spectacular. Put something around, make it clear what it represents.
It's an obvious point. That flipping tree was there long before the Toby Carvery. So move the Carvery.
It was a mature tree before America was discovered by the West.
So if there's a health and safety problem, move the pub.
We've decided on the verdict for that one in case. We spoke to Chris Head, didn't we, this former sub-postmaster, concerning the compensation that still hasn't been given to so many victims of the post office scandal. And Sir Alan Bates now urging sub-postmasters to sue the government, to take legal action over the government to get this money back. I mean, he's in such a difficult position, isn't he? Because he's only been offered like a tiny percentage of what the accountants are telling him that he's owed.
It could be expensive, or they get legal aid. They've got no money anyway. That's the whole point. But perhaps people should crowdfund for them.
Well, I have to say that the response we got from people watching to that interview with him, that he was the youngest sub-postmaster to be well, wasn't prosecuted, but pursued, endlessly pursued, for not actually losing a penny. It was entirely the system. Partly because of the strength with which he spoke. He's getting his gong, isn't he, from the palace?
So on the day he's going to get his OBE...
On the day that he's telling us that he's been offered 30% of what he's asked for.
The frustrating system.
The irony, you couldn't make it up. Sorry, could we just have a quick listen to him? This is how he sounded.
It overshadows it a little bit, you know, because you think, well, you know, it's a privilege and honour to receive recognition for the work that's been done, but it would be nice to be at the end of the process and to know that everybody has received what they're due, and then you can move on with your life, but that's just not the case.
blood brought to boiling point again on this story.
Well, Chris is an absolute gentleman, and I was speaking to him backstage, and he was absolutely nice guy, absolutely lovely, very, very calm in the situation. It remains absolutely shocking and almost feels somewhat vicious how they've been treated. It's absolutely clear, and I agree with Sir Alan Bates that there should be action against the state in this situation. But again, it remains the fact that it's a David versus multiple Goliaths, and it might not work out in their favour because the state just has infinite resources and infinite money and the best of lawyers.
And just being told one thing and then that actually not happening, and then you know. The clock is ticking, isn't it, for those people who are older, who are waiting for this money and may never see it because of the time it takes.
It's surprising that after the initial scandal, the work of the private eye that revealed it, at the Mail and other places, so after the documentaries, after the actual film, after the actual TV show on ITV and everywhere else, so after all of these things, after all the shame, all of the actual OBEs and SIRs and all that, they've still not been paid. I know. So what exactly would it take?
Well, this is building up to part 2, isn't it? The next drama, Mr Bates versus the government.
That would do the trick. And then
so maybe it's something like that.
Well, Keir Starmer, you have a chance to be a hero on TV. Might as well take it.
Yeah. Listen, we're heading for chocolate weekend, as it were. And we had a report earlier that cocoa supplies are down and therefore chocolate prices are going up. But what most people are concerned about is the size of chocolate bars, which is clearly shrinking and going down. We had one very funny message from Major on X, formerly Twitter. They've been reducing the size and weight of chocolate bars for ages now. Soon we'll only have crumbs in the packet. And he's not far wrong, is he?
There's a lot of anger about shrinkflation, isn't there?
Yep. Absolutely. Shrinkflation, same price for a smaller chocolate bar, or potentially the milk might be a little bit more watery or so, depending on how
they're saying you can do the snap test. So if it's got a good amount of cocoa in it, your chocolate should snap. But if it hasn't, then it hasn't got that same snappability. So that's a trick for you to check your Easter eggs.
I don't do Easter eggs, I don't like chocolate.
Okay, well, you're excused.
Andrew. I don't have a sweet tooth.
Or the number of crisps in crisp packets going down.
Yes.
I bought one the other day, and there are about 5 in there.
That's another case of shrinkflation for you. There you are.